They left her hanging from a bent cottonwood tree, her arms tied behind her back, ankles dragging in the snow, and a crude wooden sign nailed above her head that read, Indian Lover. Her name was Sylvie Carrick, and the men who left her there hadn't said a word. Just did what they came to do, then rode off with the sound of her father's spurs cutting into the wind. By morning, her lips were cracked from the cold, and her breath came shallow. She wasn't sure if she was alive or just stuck in the space between. Then something tugged at her skirt. Not a man, not a ghost. It was soft, curious, persistent. Through half-frozen lashes, Sylvie blinked and saw it. A bear cub, maybe 6 months old, muddy-faced and shivering, pawing at her hem. It didn't growl or bite or run. It whined. It reached again, tugging, trying to pull her down like it knew she shouldn't be there. For one moment, Sylvie wondered if death had sent her a child's ghost in animal shape. Then the cub rose on 2 legs and let out a noise. Not a roar, but a sharp, urgent cry. In the quiet of the frozen edge of Lakota land, that cry echoed like a gunshot. Minutes passed, maybe more. Sylvie couldn't count them. Her head dropped forward, her knees gave, but she never hit the ground. Strong hands caught her, not the cub this time. A man's voice, low, sharp, and unfamiliar, spoke Lakota over her. Then English. She's alive. Help me. Sylvie felt her body lift, the sign ripped from the tree, the rope sliced clean with a blade. As the man carried her, she turned her head just enough to see the bear cub following behind, its small steps sinking in the snow beside his. The warrior's face blurred in and out of her vision, but she saw the jawline, the black braid, the painted beads. Not the man she loved once, but someone like him. Someone who knew. Just before darkness claimed her again, she heard one last sentence whispered near her ear. You don't remember me, but my brother died because of you. And still, I'll carry you. Then nothing. Only the cold and the steady sound of 4 paws padding after them through the snow. Sylvie woke to the smell of sage and the sting of stitched skin. Her shoulder throbbed. Her lips bled when she moved them. A woman, older, with braids streaked in gray and eyes like hammered copper, pressed broth to her mouth. Sylvie drank because her body begged her to, not because she trusted anyone. Around her the lodge was small but warm, furs lined the walls. A child's rattle lay in the corner. But no child, just the woman, and, curled in a heap near the fire, the bear cub. Still here, still watching her. Its dark eyes blinked slowly when she looked. He won't leave, the woman said, her voice flat. Followed you all the way here. Sylvie tried to speak, but her throat cracked open. The woman didn't wait for answers. You were hung just outside our hunting path. My son found you, brought you back. Sylvie's eyes searched, desperate for something, someone. Not her father, not the sheriff, not the town she'd left, but a man named Tennowan, whose face she hadn't seen in 6 years, whose child she never got to name. The door flap rustled. The man from before, the one who cut her down, stepped in. His build was wider than Tennowan's had been, his voice too. But the eyes, they were the same kind. Alert, watching for lies. You know who I am? He asked. Sylvie shook her head once. He stepped closer, kneeling beside her. I'm Sowan, Tennowan's younger brother. You gave him medicine during the fever year. He died protecting white men from a raid that was never meant to happen. Sylvie closed her eyes. The memory was a needle. She and Tennowan in secret, mixing bark powder in a tin cup, his hand covering hers, her name whispered in Lakota. And then the letter she'd sent after, begging his people to forgive the soldiers. They never wrote back. Sowan leaned closer. You saved him once. then betrayed him without knowing. Sylvie opened her eyes, tears spilling sideways into her hair. "I didn't know," she croaked. "I never knew they'd use the path I told them." Silence fell. Then the bear cub padded over, pressed its nose to Sylvie's hand, and curled beside her like it had known her all its life. Sowan watched it, frowning. "He acts like you raised him." Sylvie blinked. "I did," she whispered. "Before he vanished last winter. I named him Ash." The room went still. That night, as the lodge crackled with low firelight, Sowan sat across from Sylvie and asked no questions. He just watched her, like a man trying to decide if a ghost deserved kindness. Ash, the bear cub, lay across her legs, soft breaths rising and falling, as if nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. But Sylvie knew better. Her wrists still bore the rope's bite. Her soul still carried the name they'd called her. Indian lover, nailed to a tree, like a crime. She shifted, feeling the pull of old scars deeper than her skin. "I found Ash in a canyon," she said finally, breaking the quiet. "Half-starved. His mother was dead beside him. I had nothing but a half loaf of bread and the bottom of my canteen. But I fed him. Slept with him curled beside me. I was trying to get to Tennowan." Sowan didn't move. "You were pregnant." She nodded. 3 months, I thought, if I could get there before the snow?" Her voice cracked. "But he was already gone." Sowan stood and paced once, slow and silent. Then he said, "And you still brought the child into a town that hated his name?" Sylvie's jaw clenched. "He didn't survive." That silenced him, for a long time. The fire snapped. Somewhere outside, a horse whinnied in the dark. "I buried him in the canyon," she added. "Near where I found Ash. I left a stone with a sun carved in it." Sowan lowered himself back down, his voice quieter now. "So why return?" Her eyes lifted. "Because I heard a rumor that someone had painted over the graves, that white men were moving into the canyon and calling it clean land." Sowan's jaw tightened. "It's true. They erased the names, flattened the markers. Then I had to see." She ran her fingers through Ash's fur. "I didn't know someone was following me." Sowan's gaze fell on the cub. "And he remembered you?" Sylvie nodded. "He found me before the men did, tried to lead me away, but I was too close to town, too slow. They found us both. He got away. I didn't." The door flap rustled. The old woman stepped in and set a carved bowl down between them. "Then perhaps," she said softly, "he brought you back for more than warmth." Neither of them spoke. But the cub opened one eye, looked at Sylvie, then Sowan, and placed one paw across both their legs, like a bridge. And neither of them moved away. At dawn, Sowan brought her the sign. He hadn't meant to, but Sylvie woke to find it leaning against the far wall of the lodge, stained and split, but still legible in thick black strokes. Indian lover. The same words they had tied to her chest as they hoisted her up, laughing like it was justice. Her breath caught. Her hand went to Ash, who stirred beneath her palm, but didn't rise. "I was going to burn it," Sowan said from the shadows, arms crossed. "But the elder said you might need to see it." Sylvie stared at the wood. "Did you see who did it?" 4 men, from the mining town. One was the sheriff's nephew." Her stomach turned. Of course, her father's blood ran thick in that boy's mouth. Pride and cruelty passed like heirlooms. "Why hang me now?" she asked, voice hollow. "After all these years." "Because someone left a letter at the town hall," Sowan said, stepping closer. "A letter with your name, a child's name, a grave location. They thought it was yours. They thought you were trying to claim land." Sylvie's throat closed. I never sent a letter. I know. Soan crouched beside her. It was me. Her gaze snapped to him. You. Tennowan had written about you, in the old way. Stories on Hyde, in the Winter Lodge. My mother found them and told me after he died. When the soldiers burned the winter camp, she thought it was all lost. But I kept one. A story about the woman with soft hands who sang to the sick. I brought it back to your canyon. And I carved a marker myself. The letter wasn't to steal land. It was to return his memory to it. Sylvie covered her mouth. Tears welled, but didn't fall. I thought I was alone, she whispered. After he died, after I lost the baby, I thought no one even remembered. Ash did, Soan said simply. He stayed in that canyon. The hunters said they saw him every winter, always circling the grave. We didn't know why, until now. Ash, still beside her, gave a small whine and licked her hand. The old woman entered again, nodding at Soan. We need to move soon. The snow's coming. Move where? Sylvie asked, alarmed. We can't stay here, Soan said. Not after the hanging. They'll come looking for who cut you down. Then we take her back to the canyon, the old woman said, to where the story began, and maybe where it can end right. Sylvie looked from the sign, to Soan, to Ash. Then she nodded. I want to bury the sign next to him. Let the land decide what it means. They rode before sunrise, with Ash curled in the blanket roll strapped to Sylvie's saddle. The old woman traveled light, perched behind Soan on a painted mare, her eyes never leaving the trail. Sylvie hadn't seen this path in 7 years, but every bend, every fallen tree, returned like a bruise she thought had faded. The wind cut colder the closer they got to the canyon. By noon, the air stung with memory. Soan broke the silence first. Do you want to stop before we enter? She shook her head. Number, if I stop, I won't move again. The trail narrowed into sandstone cliffs, where she'd first hidden with Tennowan, where they'd carved their initials in the rock, where they'd whispered names for the unborn child. She remembered the way his voice echoed here, like the canyon held their laughter and pain and wouldn't let it go. Then the bend opened, and Sylvie gasped. The grave was gone, flattened. The stone she'd carved a sun into had been smashed, shards scattered like broken teeth. A white survey flag fluttered nearby. They came, she whispered, sliding off her horse. Her knees buckled. Ash jumped down and nosed the dirt, whimpering. They came and erased him. No, the old woman said gently, dismounting. They tried. But see? She pointed to the earth. The ground remembers. And there it was, a faint dip in the earth. Not deep enough to be a hole, but just enough to mark where a body had rested. The shape was unmistakable. Ash pawed at the dirt, then suddenly sat still, then laid his head across it, tail still. He never left, Soan said. Even when they buried the past, he kept watch. Sylvie dropped beside the cub, her hand brushing the dirt. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have come sooner. You came when you were needed, the old woman said. That's the thing about spirits. They don't count time like we do. Soan unstrapped the broken sign and held it out to Sylvie. Where should we put it? She stared at it. Those hateful words, burned into wood, and for a moment she considered snapping it in two. But instead, she dug, with her bare hands just beneath the resting spot where Ash still lay. She placed the sign face down beneath the soil. Let it be buried with the truth, she said, so no one else will carry it. Ash looked up, then nosed her palm. His eyes, like Tennowan's, glistened. She swore she saw him nod. And in that moment, the wind lifted, soft, warm, wrapping around her like arms that never forgot. They camped that night within the canyon walls, under the ledge where Tennowan once strung feathers to dry. Sylvie couldn't sleep. She sat near the fire, Ash pressed to her side, the cub's breath rising and falling against her ribs like a second heartbeat. Across the flames, the old woman stirred a pot of pine tea. "He said you wore blue," she said quietly. "Tennowan always said the woman who sang to him in dreams wore blue and smelled like lavender." Sylvie smiled, eyes glassy. "I used to keep lavender tucked in my sleeves. It was the only thing that covered the sweat when we were running." The woman nodded. "He carved you into his stories, called you Skywife." Sylvie blinked hard. "I didn't know he still remembered me." "He never forgot." Someone emerged from the shadows then, quiet but certain. "He came to me in dreams too, when I was a boy. Told me a bear would guide me to a woman with a broken name, and that I'd know her by the way her eyes carried winter." Sylvie looked up. "Do my eyes carry winter?" Sowan didn't smile. "They carry everything." Ash gave a soft grunt and stretched his legs, then froze, his ears perked. Then he stood, growling, not barking but a low, guttural warning. "What is it?" Sylvie asked, rising to her knees. "Smoke," the old woman said. "I smell smoke." Sowan turned toward the canyon's mouth. "Riders, I saw a flicker." Sylvie's chest tightened. "From town?" "Likely. Someone told them what happened. Maybe the boy who watched me cut you down." Ash bolted toward the edge of camp, snarling. "No," Sylvie whispered, chasing after him. "Ash, no, stay with me." But he stood on a high ridge, watching the smoke rise like a serpent over the canyon rim. Then he howled. Not like a cub, like something ancient. The sound echoed through stone. Sowan grabbed her arm. "We need to move. There's a trail that winds behind the canyon. If we take it now, we might reach the sacred caves before nightfall." "What if they follow?" "Then let them follow," the old woman said, hoisting her bag. "But let them find only bones and stories." Sylvie looked back at the broken grave, the buried sign, the place where Tennowan once held her hand in silence. "I can't run again," she whispered. "Then don't," Sowan said. "This isn't running. It's returning." Ash bounded ahead, pausing just long enough to look back. And again, in his eyes, she saw something. Recognition, purpose. "He's showing us the way," she said. Just like before, they reached the sacred caves by dusk. The trail had narrowed to little more than a goat path, and twice the mare nearly lost footing, but Sowan never flinched. The old woman whispered words to the stone, to the wind, to the memory of those who had walked this land before, and somehow the rocks made room for them. Sylvie carried Ash now, his legs tired, his breath shallow. But he didn't protest. He just rested his head against her chest like a child too brave to cry. The cave mouth yawned before them, half hidden by wild sage and a fallen log. "Is it safe?" Sylvie asked. Sowan nodded. This place was built for hiding, and for healing. They lit no fire inside, only the soft flicker of a wrapped torch that painted the walls with dancing shadows. The old woman pointed to the far side, where crude drawings stretched across stone. Sylvie's breath caught. There, etched in ochre and charcoal, was a bear beside a woman with long hair and a bowed head, and beside her, a man with no face but hands outstretched. "This was here before I was born," the old woman said, "and yet it's always changing. The stories move when the land moves." "That's him," Sylvie whispered. "Tennowan, and that's me." Sowan walked slowly along the wall, his fingers grazing another shape. "And this is a warning." The drawing showed a crowd with fire in their hands, approaching the bear and the woman. Above them, a broken sign hovered like a curse. "They've come before," he said, "and they'll come again." Sylvie lowered Ash gently to the ground. He whined once, then curled against the cool stone. "If they find us here, then we show them truth," the old woman said, "or we vanish into it." Sylvie took a long breath. The cave smelled of earth and old sorrow, but beneath it, lavender. Faint, like memory. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a bundle of cloth. The dress she'd been forced to wear the day they hanged her. She spread it across the ground. "If I die," she said, "I won't do it in someone else's costume." She tore the cloth down the center, then again, until nothing of its shape remained. The old woman added it to the small fire, and the torch flared, throwing bright light against the walls, so bright it seemed the figures themselves stirred. Ash raised his head. Then he stood. And then, unprompted, he walked deeper into the cave, his nose low, his steps sure. "What is it?" Sylvie asked. "What do you see?" But he didn't answer. He simply vanished into the dark, as if pulled by something older than pain. Older than her. They followed Ash into the dark without hesitation. The torch barely held flame now, its light flickering like a dying heartbeat. But Sylvie didn't stop. Her hands scraped the cave walls, guiding her toward the soft sound of padded feet ahead. Behind her, Sowan carried a second torch, the old woman murmuring prayers in Lakota. And then Ash stopped. At the deepest point of the cavern, where the air grew colder and the walls glistened with moisture like breath on glass, he sat beside a pile of smoothed stones. Sylvie knelt beside him. "What is this, boy?" she whispered, brushing her fingers over the rocks. They weren't random. They had been placed. Carefully, deliberately, like a grave. She began lifting them, one by one, her hands trembling. Beneath the first layer was cloth. Beneath that, leather, a pouch, then something softer. A lock of hair bound with a blue ribbon. Her ribbon. Sylvie fell back, her mouth open, breath caught. "This is mine!" Sowan crouched beside her. "He brought this from your house, from the hanging tree." "But how? Why?" She turned to Ash, who now sat still, his eyes locked to hers. "You knew me," she whispered. "You knew me before." She opened the leather pouch. Inside was a folded piece of parchment, yellowed and brittle. She held it up to the torchlight. Her name, written in Tennowan's hand, and beneath it a single line. "Skywife lives. If you find her, protect her. If she forgets, remind her." Sylvie's breath caught like a sob. "He knew I'd come back." The old woman pressed a hand to her chest. "Or he knew you never left." A low rumble echoed through the cave, not from the earth, but from above. Hoofbeats, voices. "They've reached the ridge," Sowan said. "They'll search the canyon next." Sylvie clutched the note to her chest. "We can't fight them." "We won't," the old woman said. "We'll outlast them." She pointed deeper into the rock. "There's another exit. One only the animals use now." Sylvie gathered the keepsakes, ribbon, pouch, letter, and placed them into her satchel. But Ash didn't move. He stayed by the stone pile, pawing once more at the dirt. "What is it?" she asked. Then she saw it, something glinting beneath the dust. She dug quickly, fingers scraping raw until she pulled it free. A small silver ring. Not hers, but one Tennowan used to wear, etched with tribal markings and a single flower. "He left everything," she whispered. "He buried his memories for me." And now the cub had dug them up, one by one. Behind them the cave began to breathe, and in that breath Sylvie felt it, not just fear, not just memory, but something rising, The cave opened onto a narrow ravine behind the canyon, hidden by brush, stone, and snow so thick it swallowed sound. They moved fast, the torch extinguished, their breath clouds against the cold. Ash led the way, ears low, tail straight. Behind him, Sylvie gripped the satchel against her chest like it was her own heartbeat. The ring was still warm, as if someone had just taken it off. "They're not following," Soan said. "Yet." But the worry in her voice betrayed the silence behind them. They would come. They always did. And then Ash stopped again. But this time not for memory, not for some buried keepsake. He stood still, alert, tail twitching, ears pointed to a shadow ahead. And then it moved. A man emerged from the trees, limping, scar down his jaw, bow over one shoulder. For a full second, Sylvie couldn't breathe. "Tennowan?" she said, but the figure didn't answer. Not at first. He simply lowered his bow and stepped closer. "You kept the ring," he said softly. Her knees buckled, but he caught her before she fell. He smelled of pine and wind and something burnt, but his arms were real, solid, warm. "They said you were dead," she whispered. "They buried a man in your clothes, burned the rest." His face twitched, not with surprise, but something deeper. "I let them think it." Soan didn't speak. She just nodded once, then melted into the trees, as if she'd always belonged there. This was not her moment. "I tried to come back for you," he said, "but I saw the sign, what they did. I thought I was too late." Sylvie looked down at Ash, who now sat between them, tail thumping once. "He saved me," she said. "He remembered what I forgot." Tennowan knelt and ran a hand over the cub's head. "He was born the day I left," he murmured. "I carried him once, only once, then left him with the old one." Sylvie's breath caught. "This is your brother's son?" He looked up at her, eyes dark and shining. "Ours," he said. "By vow, if not blood. He's the one who stayed when neither of us could." The forest rustled behind them. A shout, a flash of lantern light. They had been found. Tennowan rose. "If we run, we lose this ground forever. If we stay, we show them what survived." He took her hand. "Come. There's a place, the cliff above the village. If they want to judge, let them look us in the eye." Ash barked once, then trotted ahead as if he already knew the way. And this time, Sylvie followed without fear, because what had once been buried now walked beside her. They stood at the edge of the cliff as the morning broke, gold slicing through the frost-bitten clouds like a blade. Below them, the town gathered. The preacher, the judge, her brothers, even the man who'd once strung her up like she was less than human. Sylvie didn't flinch. Not this time. She wore her mother's shawl, her father's pendant, and Tennowan's ring. Her hair was no longer tangled but braided the way Soan had once taught her. Tight, proud, warrior-born. Tennowan stood beside her, bow slung across his chest, not raised. He had nothing to prove, only to show, and at Sylvie's feet, Ash sat with a gaze fixed so steady it felt like judgment itself. Someone below shouted, "That's the Indian's cub!" Another added, "She was supposed to die." But then the judge stepped forward, not with a rope, but with bare hands raised. "We saw the sign," he said, "but we also saw the bear." Murmurs rippled, whispers of the cub that pulled at her dress, the way he'd guarded her body, the way he'd led her into the woods instead of attacking. "That wasn't a beast," someone muttered. "That was a message." Tennowan stepped forward now, his voice even. "We are not your shame. We are what you left behind when you chose fear." "You ran," one of her brothers shouted. "You left her to hang." "And she lived," he said, "long enough to be reminded of who she was." Sylvie stepped forward now. You called me a lover of the wrong people, but the only ones who remembered my name were the ones you told me to forget." The preacher clutched his Bible. "This isn't forgiveness." "No," Sylvie said, "it's not." She reached into her satchel and pulled out the sign they'd nailed above her. "Indian lover." Now cracked, burned at the edges, and held it high. "You left this to shame me. I'm keeping it to remind you." And without another word, she tied it to a cedar post beside the cliff and left it there, nailed in place. Not as a punishment, but as truth, a marker that could no longer be torn down. Behind her, Tennowan put an arm around her waist. Ash curled against her leg, and the town did not cheer. They did not apologize. But they did not move forward either. Sometimes silence is the first step. As the sun rose, the wind carried one last whisper, maybe from the cave, maybe from the cub, maybe from the memory of who she'd once been. Skywife lives. And this time, she remembered it herself. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories on Echoes of the West. If you had seen that little bear tug at her dress, would you have understood what it was trying to say? Tell us in the comments.